You recognize the name?
I was like,
Yeah.
wait before we. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. It is 9:01 and we are going to go ahead and get started. It's May 28th, 2024. It's the Spokane County Board of County Commissioners meeting. It's our 9 o'clock board briefing session. Let the record reflect that we have 4 commissioners present. Commissioner Jordan is online and Commissioner Kearns, Waldrop, and myself are in the conference room, and I have not heard, but I'm assuming we'll be hearing from Commissioner French here at some point. So he might be talking to me at this point, who knows? So he's had a big day already. So let's see, we will go ahead and get started. We have Scott Chutney here with us.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. We have the public participation program before you one more time, and this is now in the approval chain. You have seen this in its earlier iterations a few times. It has been out for public comment for more than 60 days through the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission held hearings in April, keeping them open until May to gather comment to bring to you. So we're here with you to brief this again today, share with you some of the changes that have occurred or refinements from public comment. And it will be your resolution to receive the Planning Commission's recommendation next week and then presumably act to consider this on June 11th. You can see on the screen the basis for the public participation is both in statute and rule. And as you recall, the board has adopted both the guidelines for this in July of 22 and the countywide planning policies in December. Next slide, please. The objectives have not changed. These are consistent throughout the process, and it's simply to provide as much opportunity as possible for public participation in the comprehensive plan. Next, please. You've seen, again, this slide is unchanged. It is continuing to state the general overview of where we're going. Importantly, we've received a number of comments that we'll get into toward the end of this slide deck, but it's been successful so far in reaching out to people to talk about this. We have received a number of comments and been able to incorporate it. Next, please. These next couple of slides are really to reinforce the initiatives in their broad sense, what we call equitable engagement, meeting people where they are. Go on, next, please. The communication, various things here from social media to other aspects. That at the moment we're working with Pat and the communications shop to provide them content that they are then putting out on the county's social media, as well as using the building and planning webpage as well. Next, please. And this is more of the same, using that website. And again, we're in the process of working to identify a communications manager on our side that will also then take responsibility for redesigning the website behind the county's page so that the comp plan has its own essentially unique page and becomes a very interactive community forum for this interaction beyond all of the traditional aspects. Next, please. Calendar, we are into Q2. We're going to be looking at this visioning session toward the end of that. We've already started the public forums, and to give you kind of a quick summary, we held 2 of them last week. First at the Spokane Central Library for comprehensive planning, which is kind of an inside baseball thing for an awful lot of people. We had a very good attendance, probably 35 people came there. A lot of good questions, a number of them, kind of self-evident in terms of, I've got this piece of property, I want to be in an urban growth area, when is that going to happen? But other questions about, how does this affect me? So it was, I think, a very good kickoff. The team also presented out at Airway Heights and had about 15 people, which was good. And they are in, the roadshow is in Cheney today. And so we'll get an update. We'll have 3 of our 7 meetings behind us pretty quickly. Next slide, please. As we get into 25, this is a lot of the roll up your sleeves and grind it out work of balancing public comment with GMA requirements and your goals and objectives and policy directions that you want to see. So we'll be melding all of that throughout 25. Next slide, please. And in 26, the goal is to have essentially a substantial document put together at the first of the year, and then fine tune that and run it through the various systems of agency review, your comments, and then the planning commission will hold a series of hearings to bring that together and bring it back to you for your meeting on June 30th, 2026, which is where we're hoping for consideration. Next slide, please. And this is just to reflect that we've heard some considerations in the following slide run. Is going to be a little hard to read, but it's a number of the refinements that we have introduced into the program based on comments from the public up front. And so it's not only is the public participation program helping to guide how we will interact with the public going forward, the public was now instrumental in creating that program to begin with. So we're pleased with the position we're in. And the last slide, please, Rob. The calendar, May 16th, the Planning Commission held its last public hearing, closed that, and is making its recommendation to you. And then here we are today on the 28th. We're hoping for your consideration on June 11th. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Scott?
This has been a very robust process just to create the program. So we're very pleased that the public has had a chance to interact so far.
Yeah, so at each of them, just a second, how have we, so we saw turnout at the first one, you said it's like 35 people. How about the other two?
Well, Cheney is this afternoon at 2, so we will know. Airway Heights, there was about 15 people, which in the small library was not quite capacity, but it was a full crowd for the room we had out there. So
Okay.
it's a good start.
And this is just getting initial, because looking at the calendar, this is just kind of getting initial public comment, and then next year as the plan gets refined.
Oh, this one is simply a kickoff. It is an explanation to the public. What is the comprehensive plan? Why do we do it? What is the legal basis behind it? What are we trying to do? Here are the elements that we have to consider. These are the things, and the idea we'll be creating technical advisory committees for some of these elements. There'll be general stakeholders for others, and the input process will be more or less continuous as we move forward. So there'll be a lot more opportunities for interaction yet this year. This was truly just the kickoff meeting.
Okay. And then next year's kind of the more robust public comment
Yes.
period and all of that.
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan, you had raised your hand, and then I'll go to Commissioner Waldron.
Commissioner Waldron can go first.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
still getting caffeinated here, so. Go ahead.
Give him a chance to drink a few more,
There you
a
go.
little bit more of his coffee. Well, I thought that the turnout was great. I attended at least an hour of the first meeting, and there was some really good dialogue. I do think some people did. I had a woman come out and say, "Oh, there's no taking comment." So we may want to think about, like, how are you capturing the ideas and questions at the meeting? Are they recorded or?
It is recorded.
Oh, okay.
And we took almost an hour of
I mean, there was a
questions.
really good dialogue, right?
So to say there was no chance to comment is something odd, but
So there's not an official comment period though during the meeting.
oh, I see. It's more like a formal agenda. No, we didn't think to do that because we were holding an open question at the
Right.
end of it.
So maybe you could just say to those who attend, we're gonna make sure we record all the comments and questions so that they're part of the record. Cause I think, some people are just used to like going up to the mic and having their 2 cents.
Yes, they are.
But I liked the way you just had people raise their hand and have more of a dialogue in the room, but maybe you could just
Sure, we can
explain if that was part of the records.
lay out the
Yeah.
the desired flow. That's a good comment or a good suggestion.
And then in the with the sign-in sheet, one idea I thought, because I know in the meeting, you go through every chapter and what's in every chapter of the comp plan, which I thought was very well done. Your planners did a good job. Maybe, I wasn't sure in the sign-in sheet if you wanted to capture which chapters people might be interested in being like in a working group, or you're just gonna email everybody, or,
We thought at the kickoffs that it might be premature. It might even be a little confusing, because it's like, well, should I sign up for housing and economic development or something? So we wanted to simply get a list. If you're interested, put your name down. We'll contact you. And then we'll be starting to break these out into the specialty groups, from that list. But we
and
can also make that announcement too, a little clearer. We're gonna be looking for input.
yeah, make sure people
Globally.
sign in, because or else you won't be able to follow up with them.
We always try, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't.
Right. And then, I think my last comment was also maybe mixing up in the future. I think the public participation plan is much improved, so I don't know if it's in there if you commit to having more like evening or a variety of different times for meetings so that those who are working during the day can attend.
We will.
Okay.
Yes, there's a variety. We're doing these kickoffs in the afternoons, but they are on Zoom for others who can't participate. There was a comment from a constituent that came from Commissioner Kern's office, and we responded to them saying, yes, there will be late afternoon and early evening sessions as we move along. And in addition, we'll be doing those both electronically and occasionally in person. So it'd be, in a sense, similar to the way, for example, the city council downtown meets at 6 o'clock. We may do a 6 o'clock meeting on Zoom that allows people to participate from wherever. So yeah, there will be a range of times and places throughout this next year.
And did you, in the final plan, did you resolve how you might be able to provide different types of language access if there's barriers around understanding? You know, some of these terms can be confusing even in English.
Yes, it's an evolving process. We have been working with various local advocacy groups who have volunteered to help us with translations for their constituents. We will be using some of the global techniques on the web, Google Translate and things like that. We have a cautious line to walk on a legal basis that we have to be careful. If we start translating something, we're not now being held to translate everything into 15 languages. So there's a legal precedent on the side for being cautious about this, but we're also looking at how do we still reach our broadest possible audience.
Commissioner Jordan?
Scott, can you repeat what you said or maybe add some detail about, you talked about looking for a communications person. What do you envision that role being in this process?
Yes, we're looking at a consultant role that will be essentially our public relations manager. That'll be the ability to coordinate. For example, we had internal staff coordinating these 7 kickoff meetings. That takes time, and these are planners. They're not really paid to be event organizers. And so we're bringing in somebody to handle all of the logistics of our outreach program from now until the end of 26. We have a preferred consultant in mind. We're working on negotiating that, and we expect to have that up and running by July 1st. So it'll be a person working exclusively for us that'll be tasked with making sure we're doing all of our commitments in the public participation program.
Will they be involved at all in kind of marketing the effort?
Yes.
A comprehensive plan is a pretty boring phrase, as we all know.
Yes, it is.
I think when people start to realize, it's about affordable housing, it's about open spaces, it's about climate, those things start to become maybe more interesting. So I was just thinking if there's a way to give this whole thing a snappy name or something and break it down into something that's more digestible.
That is precisely the point of this role it's to have somebody that is overseeing that on a day-to-day basis and being able to put out ideas and bring those back into us so that we're not asking our planning staff to be doing that exclusively. But yes, breaking it into its constituent pieces is where most people get interested.
Right. One more question. I'm encouraged by the plan. So thanks for all the hard work on it. It looks like it's got a lot of good pieces to it. I noticed you put in surveying people as well. And I was just curious if there's been any thought into how to do that. And the reason I ask is there's a software called Thought Exchange that I've heard good things about in terms of used by school districts to get, wide participation in terms of feedback from a survey, but it has some kind of iterative processes that allow a kind of back and forth between the county and the person being surveyed. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out as an idea, but curious if you've had any other discussions as to how to make that useful.
It's a little premature, but we have been talking about that. Our goal in any survey work is to use statistically sound methods for surveying. The idea of a blanket or the doodle poll idea, it doesn't provide a representative sample, whereas a formal survey, in fact, probably using a surveying company, again, this will fall under the communication side, doing this in a way that is statistically significant and relevant gives us more confidence and us to make recommendations to you that survey does in fact have a representative sample of the county and not just all advocates that want ball fields somewhere.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? No,
Thank
it
you.
looks pretty robust. I'm excited. So thank you. And then you're staying because you have the next topic.
I am. Beg your indulgence. One more.
Yeah, good to leave.
We are also here with the first round population allocations. Coming now, a recommendation from the steering committee of elected officials. You have seen earlier parts of this in the OFM allocation number, which forms the basis for this. There was a presentation on how this breaks down into the basic constituent levels. The PTAC has made some adjustments to account for what would be negative growth if we used a pure, statistic regression model. Done some hand balancing in this first round to produce a set of recommendations that will form the basis going forward for the land capacity analysis and the first round of the urban growth area adjustment. Next slide, please. And here you can see some of that adjustment, the negative growth, and then adjustments for the moment, some either slight growth or at least held to zero for now. Next slide, please. And then what we will be looking at here is trying to balance this with past growth patterns. And for the bigger cities that are pursuing infill strategies or aggressive infill strategies, they've agreed to be also cognizant of the fact that their infrastructure may or may not be able to accommodate some of that infill. And so those new considerations will come into play. Next slide, please. And then what we'll be doing is this round 2 version to bring that into consideration. Next slide, please. So the number of growth of residents we've said to you before is predicted or forecast by OFM at roughly 100,000 new residents in Spokane County by 2046. And what we'll be doing is breaking those out by shares. Some are going to be growing faster than others. And the next slide compares that. You can see based on the 2017 update versus the 26 update, some share is forecast lower, but many are higher. Notably, the unincorporated UGA considerably higher, more than the rest of them. And you can see that the others are pretty close, really. If you round them all off to 1 decimal point, they're all about right. And then the last slide shows the actual allocations. And these are, you can see on that additional population, the middle column, the growth areas or the growth that is going to be happening here. And this is important, particularly for us in the room. The unincorporated inside UGA is forecast to be the largest and fastest growing group of any of these, with the city of Spokane and the city of the Valley following that. So what that means is there will be if this model continues to play out, there will be continued growth pressure in those urban growth areas, aside from what the cities can handle. And for example, this for the moment assumes that the city and the city of the Valley can in fact absorb both of those numbers within their current city limit using their infill strategies. That will be tested in round 2. And so these numbers will change based on available lands that still can be developed within the incorporated cities and towns. But this is the first round final recommendation. We'll be asking for your acquiescence on this in 2 weeks. And that will give the steering committee and the PTAC then the confidence to take this into round 2, which you'll see, I believe we'll be ready for that probably by October. So happy to take any questions on this. This is where things are starting to get very specific in terms of the initial allocations of growth.
Mr. Jordan?
What did you say we'll be ready for in October? Sorry, I missed that.
We're targeting the second round of these allocations by then, and those will be filtered through the ability to accommodate growth, the land capacity analysis chiefly, and any policy decisions being made by the individual cities and towns.
And just to follow up, so the questions about infill and infrastructure, how do you expect that to be considered? Is it a matter of asking the cities to prove it as to how they can make it happen, and then it gets scrutinized by the steering committee, or what are the steps of that consideration for round 2?
You summarized them quite accurately right there. The cities and towns are individually responsible to look at their land capacity analysis and make those initial allocations. However, they must show their work, and the county will check that work in making a recommendation and reports to the steering committee. So there's a backstop to the individual cities. And remember, that's not to say that the county doesn't trust the cities. Is simply reflecting the fact that at the end of the process, the county is responsible for making these allocations, and that responsibility falls on this board. And if there are challenges to that, it is this board that ends up in court, not the cities and towns. So it is our responsibility to check that and make sure that we do our due diligence.
Thank you.
So Scott, since the other 2 commissioners here are at this on the steering committee and elected officials, so understand this probably better than I do. But if we looked at the previous comparison, comparing 2017 cycle to 2026, and then has that adjusted what you're looking at then for the going out to 2046?
No, it has not changed the 2046 projections. Those were made independently. It was just a comparison back to what we did in the 2016-17 period, part of which was the fact that the projections that were picked were higher than normal, and that's why we were challenged in court. But it turns out they were actually closer to being right than not. And it also reflects the city's decisions on what to have accepted into their world in that 2016-17 frame. So it's simply a comparison, side by side.
So we're taking what we learned from that period and putting that into what we're looking at then.
Yes, we
that
are.
2046.
Yes, we are. And it is very fair to say that the city, at least the representatives, both from planning and that sit on the steering committee, have reflected that the city did not choose wisely in 2016. They overshot in terms of their expectations, and they don't wish to do that. So I believe we'll have a much more robust assessment of the city's ability to absorb growth than we did in 10 years ago.
Okay, thank you. I guess that's what I just want to make sure that we were.
It's
I understand how that's all working, and then yes, that's how it's moving.
for those of us who are of a certain age, it's very much the Reagan-esque trust but verify approach.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Nope. Okay,
Thank you very much, commissioners.
Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, and that's gonna take us to Kyle.
Just gonna see if Deb's here. If not, I will carry it for her. Well. We get to have Deb with us this morning.
Good morning. Good
Good morning,
Deb.
commissioners. And of the many things that we are doing to prepare for taking over operations of our transfer stations, we have to select transport services. That's your
Yes.
brief on today.
Good morning. We needed to go out for bid for transport services for any of our waste going to waste to energy facility, to Graham Road landfill, or to Bartech. And so we put an RFP out this spring. We did the evaluation a couple weeks ago, and don't know that there's anything else to hit there other than tonnage wise. We do about 55,000 tons a year to waste to energy, about 400 tons a year to Graham Road, and organics around 37,000 tons. So if we go to the next slide. Thanks, Ron. We ranked the firms. We had 3 proposals, and we ranked them in this order: Dietrich Trucking LLC. It says Vancouver. They actually have a local yard here in Spokane because they currently, under contract with Waste Connections, do our transport. And so they're here. We had NWI, they came in and bid just for organics. And then we had Veneer Chip Transport Incorporated, or VCT. And they are also currently hauling our garbage, but it is to the Adams County landfill through the city's contract. So we don't have a current contract with them, it's through the city. So those were our firms. We ranked Dietrich #1, and there are several reasons, including cost. If you go to the next one, Ron, that'd be great. Their proposal was the most detailed. They included everything from alternate transportation to spill control to accident control. They have, majority of their equipment is brand new. No, there's nothing older than a 2020 truck that they use, so it's all pretty good gas mileage, newer equipment. They have the best safety record out of any of the firms that bid, and they have a history of our transfer station, so they know what they're getting into. So we're just here today to ask if for approval to enter into contract negotiations and possible contract with Dietrich.
Questions? I guess, so seeing what the next one's the estimated cost, so how do they compare cost wise?
Well, we had,
Excuse me.
I thought I'd better wait for you to do that. We had a couple different ways of looking at it. The costs, if we included Northwest Industries to do green and Dietrich to do the garbage, because Northwest Industries didn't bid on the garbage. It was a little bit less in total, but then we had 2 contracts. It was about 8% less. We had 2 contracts and 2 reconciling and 2 different companies going with all the containers. So, but it was, yeah, so about an 8% if we did go with NWI, but we had the logistics as well. So.
Right, and the RFP was to do it all.
The other big thing that we've just seen around the industry is that reliability factor. So the new working equipment is a big deal because we take, in the solid waste world, we take 5 days off a year and the waste never stops. And any hiccup in reliability has huge ramifications. So that was definitely something we did.
Dietrich had twice as many trailers and semi tractors as anybody else.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're on to the consent agenda. Ashley.
Morning. So I'm just here with an update so that you guys know where we're at with the process and we've been working on getting a food vendor back in here for a while now. And so we did post the legal notice on April 17th and it was posted the 17th and the 24th. And Brenda and Melanie have been wonderful in purchasing, really helping to kind of streamline this process because we don't really have anybody that oversees that area. There's a few of us that just jump in and help basically. So I'm one of them, but they've also done a phenomenal job helping this. So the legal notice was posted. We only had one respondent to the RFP actually. And so that one respondent is Barry Cooks, which you guys probably know as the hot dog guy that is outside. But they do have a location they're currently in somewhere else, but they'd like to get out of there sharing it with another restaurant who's been allowing them to use their space. And so they did submit the RFP. They're the only ones that submitted. They met the requirements of the RFP. So it is my recommendation and purchasing's recommendation to go ahead and move them forward in the process. I know purchasing is working with legal right now to make sure that we've jumped through all of the right hoops. I think there was a little bit of a mix up where it didn't come for open discussion. Scott, is that what the issue was?
It has to because there's a couple things, because the county would be leasing our space. We'll have to do or we'll have to hold a public hearing for the lease, similar to what we did with the WSU extension with the 4-H group wanted to go in there. And then another little unique twist is when you have a concessionaire that's going to go into county property, you have to first provide an opportunity, I think, or notice through Department of Health to see if any of their disadvantaged firms who are on a list want to provide services. So that step has been done and we've determined there is no one that's interested in that, but we will have to do a public hearing for the lease.
And I know purchasing was working with Jim Amacio to see if, because we did the RFP, do we still need to do the public hearing? So I was out sick last week. I haven't had a chance to connect, but I just wanted to give you guys an update. We'll move through the process. Yes. Okay. So we'll get that process completed and then.
RFP.
Okay, perfect. So we'll get that moving forward and finalized. But just at this point, we only had the one respondent. He will be offering kind of a grab and go. So quick and easy grab and go, and then coffee items. So we're hopeful that we can continue to push this forward sooner rather than later, but just wanted to give you guys that heads up as to where we're at, as both purchasing and my office have been getting quite a few questions, and so wanted to just notify you of that. So we'll work through the processes that we weren't aware that we were needing to work through. We'll get that done. We're grateful to Jim Amacio and his help with that as well. And as Melanie's learning, and Tony used to do all this for us and for me, honestly, we're just kind of learning as we go sometimes, but we'll make sure that we get it wrapped up. So just wanted to provide that update. And then once we get everything final, then we'll get it on your final consent.
Questions? I guess just exciting to get the space used and have that opportunity for people. You know, I know people are using Gentlemen outside a lot,
Yes.
so this would be great. Does he plan to keep outside as well, or just?
I think he's still trying to assess that and what makes sense, especially with just staffing and all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people in the food industry right now are trying to figure out how to best staff. So depending on what traffic looks like, he's going to figure out what makes sense for him. Is it still on this location? Is it just central inside? But he'll work through that. But I'm really excited about the opportunity. He's got many years of food service experience here in Spokane in the industry. So I think it's a really great opportunity for our staff to have a really yummy option again. So,
Great. Thank you.
yeah.
Hey, that's gonna take us to Duck Chase.
Morning.
If you're all presenting together.
Sure, yeah. Good morning, board. Appreciate your time this morning. With me is Jonathan Miller, one of our owners representatives for the Progressive Design Bill. project that we're here updating you on, and Jonathan specializes in progressive design build projects. And of course, you recognize Julia Cole, who will be the project manager on our Camas Meadow and Plants Ferry Sports Complex. So excited to be here with an update today on where we're at with the project. So looks like we've got the slideshow up there, which is perfect. And I'll go ahead to the next slide. So again, just a little background, the Camas Meadow project is a 10-acre park out in the West Plains. And the Plants Ferry Sports Complex, we had completed the full master plan. We're looking just at the phase 1 portion of that. And again, we bundled these into a single progressive design build project. Next slide, please. There's just a nice snapshot of the master plan. And you can see, again, we have a couple of areas in the initial master planning and cost estimates. We've identified everything we hope to accomplish, but we are going into this with the full knowledge that we don't anticipate having the funding to complete the entire project, but through this process, we'll be able to figure out exactly which elements we can complete with the funds available, and we'll be able to get specific cost estimates for other elements. Next slide. Again, that exact same thing applies to our Plants Ferry phase 1, where we have the additional parking, up to 3 synthetic fields illuminated, and a new road connection to the south. And again, you may recall the cost estimates on this were as high as, I think, $9.5 million, and we're working with about $5 million. So again, we'll learn through the process what we can afford and what those additional options could cost should additional funding become available. Next slide, please. Okay, we received 11 million in ARPA funds. And through the process, we have 7.4 million identified for the guaranteed maximum price with the design build team. We have 3 million identified for other soft costs. There's a 5% contingency in there. Master planning work that's been completed, the land acquisition, project management, site survey, geotech, and other special inspections and permitting and so forth. And then we have 600,000 for sanitary sewer infrastructure. Next slide, please. So why progressive design build? Again, this is just a refresher. They're able to align the budget with the scope and have early cost certainty, which is just really great. I'm excited for that compared to the traditional design bid build. We will identify efficient and innovative design solutions, opportunities for sequencing of the 2 projects, time to market expedited, which we'll talk about that, single point of responsibility for us, and that synthetic turf is very specialized, and through this process, there's an ability to ensure that we have a highly qualified contractor that's able to complete that work. Next slide, please. Again, a quick recap. My last touch was back just after March 28th, after we had received approval from the PRC. And we've been working through the steps in soliciting proposals from qualifications from progressive design build teams. We received 3. Next slide, please. Talk through that. We received 3 submittals. We've shortlisted down to 2. You see our selection committee. We have Mr. Simmons, Julie Nepp, Julia Cole, Kyle, and I'm enjoying the subject matter expert. And again, members of our design owners, representatives, and purchasing. It's been very helpful too. Been a cooperative effort. Next slide, please. And as mentioned, we had the 3 submittals. We shortlisted down to 2. Back on May 9th, we conducted interactive meetings with the shortlisted finalists. And here, Monday, June 3rd, we will be opening the proposals, and the print's a little small, but you can see the scoring outlining. And we're excited to be selecting the highest scoring team. Next slide, please. And so we are right here where the proposals are literally due today. So that's exciting from the two shortlisted teams. And our goal and what we're working towards is to bring to you for selection on June 4th is the highest scoring finalists. And I recall at my last touch back in, I think it was early April, Commissioner French was very excited over an opportunity to do a groundbreaking, if you will, for the West Plains this year. And I'm pleased to report through the interactive meeting process and working with the teams, it's been found that it will be imperative and very helpful to the project to get started on the West Plains earthwork this fall, taking advantage of the dry weather, recognizing that the soils out there can be challenging to work with up and other than the 3-4 months in the summer. And so we want to take advantage of that. We feel that with this team, we'll be able to do that. And that's one of the reasons we're hoping to shave a week off of our timeline. And through briefing you today, we're hoping to bring you that firm a week from today to your regular legislative meeting for selection. And that will help us and as we race against the calendar to take advantage of the time, and would do a package for that groundwork ahead of time and work with whichever team is selected, the highest scoring one. So we're pretty excited about that. And so that is our goal. Next slide, please. And so the request, as I've just mentioned, will be to bring before you during the 2 o'clock to award project number P13853 to the highest scoring progressive design build team finalists. This will be determined on June 3rd when the scores and the package is all open for Camas Meadow Park, Plants Ferry Phase 1, and authorize myself and or Scott Simmons, CEO, to be able to proceed to negotiate and enter into a guaranteed maximum price with the selected in the amount of 7.4 million. Next slide, please. And that's it. Any questions?
So you guys will be opening them on June 3rd and scoring. And then would you brief us the morning of the 4th?
We certainly can brief you then as well. Absolutely. That'd be great.
I mean, I think it'd just be appropriate to brief the board that morning.
Sure.
I'm
Sure.
happy to put it on the afternoon, but that way if there's
Perfect.
any major questions or any of that, we can get them answered
You bet.
or not, if we
Yeah.
to take it off.
Sounds
Hopefully
great.
not.
No, that's great. And that's why we're here today too. We really wanted to provide as much advance notice of the progress, and we're really pleased with the 2 shortlisted firms and are optimistic that whichever one is ultimately the highest scoring. We look forward to sharing that with you too. And we'll plan to be here in the morning with an update on that a week from today.
No, I think that would just be appropriate
Sure.
to do that. And so I appreciate that. And
Yep.
you guys will be making sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Absolutely.
So knowing contractors. So, Scott.
One of the pieces that you'll see that Doug's highlighting here, so the ask is to authorize the ability to enter into a GMP up to 7.4. The team that's selected will be going through a validation process, and Jonathan, correct me if I misstate any of these things. That validation will help us understand what we can receive in that 7.4 million. They'll also provide some opportunities for betterments, owners betterments, that we might be able to add if that's a desire. The board, I think back in April as well, had a couple of board members have expressed some interest in possibly utilizing some other funds like carbon tax or whatever to put towards these projects if we're just short a little bit of area. So there'll be another touch point back with the board once the validation's done prior to doing the GMP to say, okay, board, here's what the GMP is showing us. Here's what the validation says. Here's what the betterment opportunities are. What do we want to do with that? So this won't be a go away and you won't see us again. We'll come back and touch base in that later August timeframe as well to share what the validation process gave to us.
Excited for that. It's
Exciting.
Yeah, yeah, really pleased. We'll be excited to come back and see you several times.
Yes, yes, you will.
Work through.
We're excited to see you come back, so.
We'll keep that going. All right.
Okay,
Well, I think
Great.
that's what we have. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
thank you. Appreciate it. Got George and Chris here, so.
Morning.
Good morning.
So I'm here this morning to brief on the recommended proposed allocations for the 2025 project year homeless services projects. These projects, if you remember, would have been presented in front of the Housing and Community Development Advisory Committee and strategically briefed to the board of the strategic planning meeting on 5/6. And so this is just going back over those projects after I had a little bit of time to discuss with the applicants the project scope and adjust some budgets there. So if we could go to the third slide, which we're there. Just for a little bit of background, the board approved last week to accept a supplemental budget amendment to our CHG award, which increased our budget from about $8.7 million to that $11.1 million. And so those funds are to be used over the 2-year cycle from 2023 to 2025 to fund those homeless services projects. On that early 2023 resolution, we approved $3.3 million to be spent in this kind of category. And seven projects were funded from this funding source. We can go to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background information. I'll probably do this every time that we brief these types of projects, just so we're on the same page of what these funds are going for and towards. There are a couple different funding sources here that we're talking about. CHG standard is, of course, the main amount. And then we've got CHG eviction prevention, which is a subcategory coming from CHG that can only be used for those types of projects. And then we've got an additional award from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. That is the Emergency Solutions Grant, very similar to CHG funding. It just comes from a federal source as opposed to a state source. If you look at the allowable interventions on the ESG grant, you'll see that they're very similar to the allowable interventions on the CHG standard grant. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Next slide, please. So I hope to move through these in sequential order, talking about all of the recommended intervention types and the projects that are recommended to be funded within each of these intervention types. The first being emergency shelters, which I think are were easily the most competitive funding pool or application pool out of all these projects. These projects do provide short-term temporary shelter for those experiencing homelessness, and emergency shelters can be facility-based, or they can be that scattered site or hotel, motel voucher site. Next slide, please. So the advisory committee recommended the 7 projects that you see up on your screen there. We're looking at award to Family Promise of Spokane, Volunteers of America, 3 projects there, Catholic Charities, the House of Charities, a small award going to, I think it's YFA Connections, sorry, the font is small there, and then 1 award to YWCA's Shapes Shelter. A lot of these awards were recommended, or some of these awards, I should say, were recommended for reduced funding. And then if you remember, we chose some alternates, or the advisory committee chose some alternates should we get additional funding from Commerce, which did end up happening. And so these are based on those increased amounts from the Department of Commerce. I'll go through all of these kind of in order. They should kind of match those funding recommendations that you see at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll add them all up at the end. I'll ask for any questions at that point. Next slide, please. Next intervention type is homelessness prevention. Again, this is an intervention that's designed to prevent homelessness, to intervene before folks are on the street. This is a more informal process, but it involves kind of in-depth case management. This is for households who are at risk of homelessness to obtain stable housing to avoid that. These services include case management and temporary rent subsidies. Next slide, please. So the recommended funding out of this category would have been that $2.5 million that you see at the bottom of your screen. For context, we had the most amount of funds to use in this category. And the recommended applications, the applications that were put in were actually under that recommended amount. So all of the applications that were put in were recommended for funding in full. And we actually have some additional funds in homelessness prevention or eviction prevention to potentially allocate to these applicants as well that we'll be talking about a little bit later. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, can we go back one slide? I should specify the application. So these would be going to Family Promise of Spokane. Cheney Outreach Center and Medical Lake Outreach Center are both kind of rural applicants that are meant to serve that rural population over on that side. Spokane Neighborhood Action Partners is getting 2 awards. One is a kind of diversion-based award, and the other is that eviction prevention award. Transitions would be asking for an eviction prevention award, and the YWCA again focused on domestic violence survivors. Yes, ma'am.
So Chris, on this one, just looking at the areas that we are covering, how do we know we're helping cover the north side Meade area of the unincorporated county and then kind of down South County, because I'm not seeing Fairfield.
Yeah. And so these projects, and that's a great observation. So these projects, of course, would be mostly facility based, but eviction prevention or homelessness prevention can meet the applicant or meet I guess I should say the client where they are. So clients up in those areas should be reflected in the CMIS or Homeless Management Information System. We will pull that data and say, here's who we're serving from X zip code or Y zip code. It'd be difficult to pull that information based on the projects themselves.
Right. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is how do we, in the RFP process, how do we seek that they're providing services outside of just Spokane, city of Spokane, into those other areas? Because, like SNAP has done that in the past. So I guess I'm asking, is that part of the request for proposal that they would be reaching out to those areas as well?
But we gave additional kind of prioritization towards projects who were serving applicants in rural areas. We identified that in the RFP as something that we were looking at. That would have given them an additional kind of prioritization during the advisory committee's funding deliberation. That wouldn't necessarily say that they are exclusively to serve people in the rural areas, just to say that we're recommending this project because they do serve people in the rural areas. That's something that we could, of course, add to later RFPs.
So I guess my request would be like in the future that we look at if someone in Fairfield is experiencing homelessness or potentially could be getting displaced, who are they reaching out to get help from our dollars?
Sure. Kind of a more streamlined from those areas.
Yes. So that somebody is providing that service, just like up in Meade, Elk area. If someone in the Elk area is getting displaced because they've lost their job, can't afford their mortgage any longer. Who do they contact? Because they will contact potentially us, or how do we let those areas know that they can contact somebody, because that's what these dollars are for. Just because there's not a specific outreach center in those areas, I want to make sure that our dollars are going, all around.
Absolutely. And when we get to the kind of the outreach projects, that would hopefully be the goal of those outreach projects too, is to make sure that we're leveraging the resources that we're investing in and making sure that the full county has access to those resources, creating those access points in those more rural areas.
Okay. So, because I think it have to be part of the RFP process that they know ahead of time that that's something to be requesting and wanting to make sure, because otherwise they're asking for their funds based on what they know their program is. So.
And that was something that came through loud and clear when we did our stakeholder engagements, which is why that prioritization that Chris had mentioned was a rural focus. And that's something as we've been working with the city of Spokane, the city of the Valley, is trying to work together as the jurisdictions to say there's an urban response, a suburban response, and a rural response. And so we're trying to be more in that suburban/rural response in the work that we're doing. We've got some. We're focused on that, but it's going to take a little bit of time to turn the ship in that direction. But that's where we're going.
Thank you, Commissioner Walker. But would it be fair to say that Family Promise would be, through this investment, would be providing homelessness prevention services to families in the unincorporated and rural areas, and then SNAP would be providing that for singles?
Correct.
In those same areas?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you could direct people to either Family Promise if they have if it's, you know, more than one person in the household, or SNAP if it's just a single adult.
Absolutely. All of these projects being funded by the Consolidated Homeless Grant shall use what's called coordinated entry to divert people to the appropriate services. So if someone's coming from Fairfield and they need some services, they should go into a coordinated entry pipeline, and that should direct them based on their household status and composition to the most appropriate services. So if that was a single, they would be directed to or referred to SNAP.
But, okay, and that catches people when we're trying to prevent them from being evicted, because sometimes the coordinated entry is really more geared towards people who have already become homeless.
Yeah.
So that's it's a little bit different, right?
The challenge with it is the funding itself requires that coordinated entry. So
Even for these dollars.
it does, yeah.
Okay.
So that's a challenge, and that's the challenge that we take upon ourselves of messaging and educating our rural partners. So the other week I was out in Rockford talking with the community and trying to get them to have greater awareness around the different services that we're offering, because certainly as it relates to homeless prevention, we want someone that's been in the house they've raised a family in that house, and now they have some housing instability with the cost of living and everything else going up. We want that family or individual to stay in that house and not have to fall into the homeless services system in a way to access these resources. So we've got some additional messaging and work to do with our rural partners to make sure that there is that more effective triage approach to it, but it does have to go through that coordinated entry. So it makes it a little wonky to manage through that.
And then, yeah, if you're doing outreach, if you just let Brenda know, so that way I'm aware of the outreach, going on down South County. That'd be great.
Any other questions on the homeless or the recommended homelessness prevention projects? Great. Next slide, please. So the next intervention type is rapid rehousing. This is more your quote unquote traditional kind of approach to taking in a participant, figuring out what their needs are and finding the most appropriate housing solution for them. Two projects were recommended to be funded. That would be Catholic Charities St. Margaret's Shelter and SNAP. These are both projects that are familiar with working with county funds before and have pretty great outcomes. And that would be for $742,403 rapid rehousing. Again, we skipped over the funding kind of pool that each of these are drawing from, but emergency shelter and rapid housing would be coming from the Consolidated Homeless Grant Standard, while the former eviction prevention is coming from simply that CHG eviction prevention. Next slide, please. We are also, next slide, please, sorry. Also funding a couple outreach projects or recommending funding to a couple outreach projects. This is a allowable intervention type that allows us to leverage the investments that we're making in the other areas and then utilize those outreach areas to create those kind of access points or create streamlined services to these service points. So this is for engaging people experiencing homelessness or otherwise not accessing the services that they need and connecting them with the most appropriate service. Next slide, please. So these two projects that were recommended for funding were Spokane Neighborhood Action Partners and then Yo-Yo Spokanee's application. I should note that the latter was a new outreach project that was proposed, and the original budget application was quite high. Worked with that applicant to talk about a couple of allowable costs for moving those from the budget, and then talking about what their project scope is in regard to the countywide focus. They are as a SNAP focused on countywide approach, serving all. Of course, their focus is the indigenous population, while SNAP's focus is more of those leveraging those rural access points, as kind of Madam Chair was talking about, to get services into those projects that we're investing in from the earlier categories. Any questions? Great, next slide, please. Last intervention type would be transitional housing. This is kind of that modified approach between shelter and a rapid rehousing project, in which someone would come into a more defined shelter space for a shorter period and have some case management and focus services to get them moved on in a relatively short amount of time. This is traditionally up to about 2 years. And this is designed to get folks into permanent housing. Next slide, please. The project that was recommended for funding would have been Catholic Charities, St. Margaret's Shelter. They were recommended for funding from an additional or an earlier intervention type as well. They do a lot of different services out of that brick and mortar site. And that would have been for $213,000. Next slide, please. So we had a little bit of work to do to get up to the $11.1 million after the $3.3 million that was approved from last cycle. So you can see that we're above that kind of spending pace from last project year. So about 6 million if funded as all those slides had shown, it'd be about 6 million, $5.9 million funded into these respective intervention types. And then if I can move on one slide, please, as well. An additional considerations to keep in mind is that part of that $2.4 million supplemental award, some of those funds were quite flexible and to be used for maintaining programs and investments for the county, as well as kind of making sure that projects weren't losing funding and there were no considerable service gaps in those areas. So we were able to fund or recommend a project for funding that was actually coming from the CDBG application stack. That'd be for $550,000 for a reclaim project. That'd be for land acquisition for a transitional housing project. This would be out of those additional, or I should say supplemental document recording fee funds. And this is to, again, maintain programs and investments, effectively keeping bed counts where they are this year. We know that there are going to be some hits to bed counts coming later this year. So I think this would be a great investment for the county. As well as that federal award, 135 is recommended to go to St. Margaret's Shelter. That ESG award shall be matched with grant or county funds. And so that project would be matched with CHG funds. So we're kind of leveraging some resources there. Next slide, please. So if anyone was doing the math, this leaves with a little bit of money left over. About $291,000 remains unallocated from CHG standard. This is actually a pretty low amount in the grand scheme of things. This leaves kind of a flexible amount to be used for administrative costs should we need them, or to reallocate these costs. I can come back to the board and propose some alternative strategies to spending these dollars. And $713 remains unallocated from eviction prevention. This is less flexible. And so this is something that the advisory committee recommended that I go back to the applicants and ask if they were to receive extra dollars, what would those outcomes be? And what would those projects look like? I'm pretty confident in the responses that I've received back from those applicants at this point, that most, if not all of that $713,000 would be able to be spent with the current applicant stack. Next slide, please. So if there are not any glaring concerns, I would recommend that the board approve the awards as proposed at the following legislative session next week on Tuesday. So let me know if you have any questions or concerns.
So just on that 713,000 for the eviction prevention. So you're thinking of doing another RFP for that, or just rolling that into the next round of funding?
Actually rolling it into this current round. So when I reached out to all the applicants who were in the current kind of eviction prevention stack, they were all fully funded and asked a couple of questions. Hey, we've got some additional funds. Would you be interested in receiving additional funds? How would your outcomes look if you did receive additional funds? Where do these go to towards? And so we're trying to wrap them up. These funds shall be obligated before June 30th of 2025. So we're trying to get these out as fast as we can. So while we could come back with additional RFP, additional recommendations, that'd be a pretty tight turnaround.
So you'll roll those dollars into what we see next week?
This would be in addition, yes and no. Next week would approve these funds here, and then I would come back and brief and say, hey, here's the additional.
Okay.
And they're going to these applicants. Could you approve these supplemental awards to these contracts?
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
This was a really great presentation. I think it was really helpful, easy for us to understand. So
Visuals.
you did a great job.
I was hoping to make it a little
Yeah.
more palatable.
No, so yes, so it was really good.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. That takes care of our agenda for today, and will take us to miscellaneous items. Mike Sparber, you had a miscellaneous item?
Yes, thank you. I just want to put the board's awareness, the jail population is at 932. So it's up there quite a ways. You'll recall from our presentation on Monday, 915 was kind of that red mark where it starts heading into that point where it's 703 downtown. So we have 12 beds to play with it. If the demographics don't have more house alones or some of those that only could be in one cell could really change that dynamic. We're at 205 out of Geiger, which has been averaging about 186 to 190. So we're up at Geiger as well. And then we have 23 out of electrical monitoring. So Don contacted me. He is making a request to reduce the Marshall population by 20 to 25 to free up some beds for the incoming population. So just wanted to make the board aware that we're got some significant challenges over there. We're working on them. So, question?
Question for you. So when I was at the Breakfast with the Chief Foundation meeting or breakfast, they were talking about like kind of May through August or even peak times. So we're seeing that happen as the weather warms up. Potentially more tend to be rest happen. I don't know if you guys, that's kind of
It's kind of the same for the jail. Yes, ma'am.
same for the jail.
Yeah.
So as we're looking at that, and I understand with the marshals, US Marshals, to try to reduce that population to have to increase ability for us, where do those people go?
Well, the US Marshals traditionally have taken them down to Benton County if they have availability or they find availability somewhere else.
Yeah, so what happens if there's no availability somewhere else?
I
I mean, we just can't kick them out, can we?
Right. Well, I don't know that I have the answer for that, but in the past, they've been able to find beds for,
Okay.
so.
Okay, just because I know talking to a couple of commissioners down there, they're actually, I think, full as well.
Yeah,
So
I think,
There isn't that ability that there used to be about 5 years ago where they had space, they built a big enough jail. And, but with some of the other, like Columbia and Garfield have closed their jails, so they're going to Walla Walla. Walla Walla's not taking extras, so Benton County's, it just,
the benefit for the US,
everybody is under the same stress that we're facing.
100%, the benefit for the federal population is they can go across state lines to like Kalispell or those other areas. Where like the DOC doesn't have that flexibility to go across the state line like that.
Okay,
So the DOC population, we've dropped down to 15. That's a cutoff for 15, and we're at 15. So they're finding spaces for their other population too. Commissioner?
Oh, I was just saying that as far as what I have heard with the federal marshal I think that they could find space in, you know, I think that when certain people are coming up for trial, it's very convenient, obviously, to be here in Spokane with the court. So that's a factor, but if people are not, do not have a trial coming up anytime soon, they could be housed somewhere else, but
And I
yeah.
think- Yeah, and I think that's our next steps is to try to come to a trial ready format to try to, stay supportive of the US Marshals. I'm exploring that too as well, so I just wanted to make the board aware. that-
Access to their attorneys, that's.
Right, so, because otherwise there's space, but it's inconvenient space for what they're trying to accomplish, so we're gonna kind of have a model where if you're trial ready, work with them and say, okay, we can have them in here, when's their trial due? And then when they go to the trial, some are longer than others, of course, but we're gonna try to manage that finite space so that it addresses what they need in Spokane with federal court, along with, being supportive of it. We can only do so much based on the space that we have.
Okay.
Any other questions? Commissioner Kern? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the update.
Oops, sorry.
Okay, so then I've got a miscellaneous from WASAC. They're trying to go around and do some meetings to talk about the bylaw changes, what they're looking at for dues and all of that as we look at trying to bring King County back into the fold. So Derek, the interim director, this is Eric's last week this week. So Derek, the interim director, is going to be in town for the WASAFL conference on Wednesday, June 5th through Friday the 7th. And wanted to see if we'd be willing to do a special meeting to come and just brief us on that. So that would be all get briefed before we have a special general membership meeting, June 26th, I believe is the date for that.
What day did he want to do the special meeting?
He's over here Wednesday through Friday, the 5th through the 7th. So if there's, even if we can just get as many people as we can who, just to get update and also meet Derek. That'd be good. So can Gina work with?
I know that I'm
calendars.
completely open on Friday. Thursday, I'm in at the WSU Vancouver campus for a advisory boards meeting with all the different WSU advisory boards. Wednesday, I know I have a big U district board meeting, but I could always jump on a Zoom or something. So I'm flexible.
Depends on the day. I have some days I'm open, others.
Yeah, I know, I'm the same. So it's gonna be just trying to see what we can coordinate. And that's why, if we can get 3, it'd be a special meeting, we'd have to notice it, but it'd just be for that purpose and.
I would, yeah,
Zoom
I'm
available.
glad I was wondering what the updates were, so.
Yes. So they've been doing them, he and Commissioner Kaufman have been doing several just with some of the other counties and trying to schedule us. So. Okay, I will talk to Gina to see what we can figure out for schedules to then be able to get that done and notice it as a special. Meeting. Hopefully all 5 of us can, between Zoom and, cause probably be, I'd have to talk to him, but I think we can get it done in a half hour, but if we need to press it, and then this will be after the next bylaws committee meeting is this week, so they have more information for everybody, so, okay. We'll work through that to see what we can figure out.
Miscellaneous as well.
Just
Just a heads up, so Primera did come to an agreement with the local care group, so that had come up in a meeting a couple weeks ago, and I promised an update. They have reached an agreement, and we put a notice in last week's newsflash, and we'll continue to just make sure employees are aware that an agreement was reached, and so there will be no concern of out-of-network coverage for those with multi-care doctors who have Primera.
Also on next week's consent agenda, we will have the commissioner's resolution for the cash defeasance of the 2019 C bonds. The PFD did sign the resolution that we needed them to sign before we could move this forward. So that'll be on next week's consent agenda as well.
did they agree to the terms?
The other one, yes, they are agreeing to the other terms for the 25% and 4% interest. I'll be getting that resolution for you guys to sign after they've signed it as well.
So the 25% this year,
Remainder next year,
all the rest, okay, got it.
all the rest with 4% next year.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
Great. Anything else? Add anything?
That's always got something.
I was just gonna call your attention to the Sunday paper headline.
Memorial Day 2024.
Yes, it says French pitches bold water solution, so some above the fold front page attention on Commissioner French's district. That issue, I know Commissioner French is continuing to talk with local media individually on as he's working with stakeholders. So I don't think I think that's more of a commissioner issue, but just bringing it for your attention that that's out there. Yep. And then on the public safety front, I do anticipate we'll have some reporting on last week's presentation on capacity issues with the jail. And so if those come in, I'll let you know. Part of, I think what's driving that as well is what the city just embarked on, doing some additional analysis and study, but also I think Corporal Gregory's been very busy on the law enforcement side as the PIO for the sheriff, just fielding calls about what people are seeing. There was a shooting, I think, that happened during the Torchlight Parade. And so some of this is more downtown and more city than out in unincorporated county. But that's been a hot topic in the local as well. And so I wouldn't be surprised if with the jail being the captor's mitt on the other end, we start hearing more questions about that. So nothing right now, but when it comes in, I'll make the chair aware and we can take it from there. So, yep. And then for proclamations, Martha Lou is out this week. So if you have any needs for her departments, let me know. I'm backing her up. And we will have a proclamation probably partnered with Scraps on Adopt a Cat Week as we're coming out of kitten season. We've mentioned that before. But we have some opportunities in June. That's really the only one that we proactively brought. So if there are other resolutions that come, or excuse me, proclamations that come to you all that you would like the board to consider, feel free to pipe those people over to me. May was a very busy month on the proclamation front.
It was, and we'll finish with the one for Eric Johnson today.
Yes.
See here, you gotta be here.
I don't know if he's gonna be here. I did deliver.
So it was your responsibility.
He's a little busy with trying to wrap things up, but we did have a nice dinner for him when we were over in Alderbrook for the board retreat. So that was good, and I delivered the proclamation at that point. So he has the official proclamation in his. They put together a whole binder of all the official proclamations.
Nice.
So yes. So I don't know if he will be. I should check with him on that. Thank you.
I hope it passes since you gave him the copy already.
I hope so too. I was, really worried.
I hope you didn't give him a fraudulent proclamation.
I think two or three other topics I'll just mention for board awareness that I think will continue to be newsworthy. We got really good coverage on the opioid settlement funds. Thanks to Martha Lou and Justin for sitting for a number of rounds of interviews. It's really the most media attention that I think we've had on something the board has acted on since the fire reserve measure 1 in the fall. And so that was really good, a really good splash. The Inlander had some really in-depth reporting with a lot of good community voice there as well. The other one I would say is with the parks. And so we've talked with Doug on the public events calendar. That's looking like late summer and fall. And along with our big infrastructure projects, we have some planning underway with Kyle's team for the fall. Of course, state of the county and spotlight and other things. So yeah, staying busy on that front. A couple other items we can talk about offline.
I thought there was good coverage too, information out there about the victims of the fires and how many signed up to receive the FEMA assistance. So
yes,
that was good information coming out from from FEMA, but also from the congressional offices.
Yes. Yes, that was very good. I was made aware there was a wildfire symposium that emergency management held. Chandra, I think you might
Yeah,
have
I
attended.
attended like half of it and then had to go to a Board of Health meeting or something that day, but yeah.
I think that was a good opportunity to get information out as we get into fire season, what the
I
things
would-
starting to.
Yeah, there was some really good. If you could take it and capture it and make it really easy for people, but it was good information, like looking at the current amount of rain we've received, kind of what this year looks like. There was some good information that I don't know who's in charge of like sharing that out, but I think the county could play a role in doing that.
We'll have an opportunity coming up with the annual burn ban, assuming it'll take effect sooner rather than later, sometime in June traditionally when we start to hit the drought period. So we will get that out and I'll follow up with Chandra about that, see if there's something we can do to be helpful. I know she's down at PIO over there, so.
Okay.
Did remember, Patrick just reminded me on the opioid dollars. So next week, Mike, with some support from Justin, will come in and share some kind of high level project timelines for the SRSC expansion. Kind of what our next steps are, just to show the activity that's being done to date to get that moving forward. So,
And I'm actually gonna be in DC next week. I'm combining a trip for my college reunion with visiting, since I didn't go to the GSI fly-in. I thought, well, I'll go visit and meet some of the staff and some of the offices, and John Colton was already flying over for another client, so anyway, we're gonna go meet with some of the offices and it'll be good to talk about the FEMA response. And my goal is really just to find out what's going on around some of the bills that maybe we might want to consider, supporting as a board related to FEMA reform or PFAS or what have you. So I will keep my ear to the ground and come back, and hopefully we can continue that conversation with John and his team, Desimone, around, what do we want to prioritize in terms of policies, and now that the earmark process is over.
So what we need to start to do is to start to look at what our federal agenda is going to be as we move forward. So I was planning to meet with John and Jeff just to kind of say, how do we want to frame that, and then start to have that discussion here amongst the commissioners, so we can start to formulate what we want the federal agenda to look like, and how we want it, kind of two pieces of it, looking at what do we want to be lobbying for versus what are the grant opportunities that we want to be talking about and looking forward to. So, and how we go about that. So kind of the dual discussion on that will be coming up. But I think it's not until next week.
So I'll be zooming in on Tuesday as much as I can in between meetings. So, and Monday I'll be zooming in too.
Is there legislation for FEMA reform in DC? Is it, you said we?
Well, I can't imagine there's not a bill out there, and so that'll be part of what we'll find out, if there's something that could improve the way FEMA responds to wildfires, right?
So I know Senator Cantwell and Congresswoman Rogers have the Malden Act still, which is one piece of the puzzle. And then if they're interested in others from our experience, that would be good. And I think your trip is really well timed, and I'm sure John and Jeff are all over it. But now that the requests are in for the community projects, it's the time to start actively lobbying and advocating, because it's appropriation season. And so the committees and the subcommittees will be doing their work and actually coming up with the draft bills, kind of adding those chapters and any new chapters into the book, even though that's probably after the August recess in September against the annual deadlines that always happen. But the committees will be actively considering funding community projects. And so this is a really hot time to be back there.
So you did forward out that Congresswoman McMorris Rogers' office did she move forward one of our projects, or it's on a list?
It's on the list
Okay.
that this is the first step,
Right.
is to get on that list, but it still has to go through committee, so it's not a done deal.
And do we know if our other projects through
Not-
Canwell,
We're
right?
not-
Well, it'll be a good opportunity to find out how that process is going. And no, I'm excited because the Inlander article, like what I was thinking was bringing that Inlander article to really describe the need and how all the community partners are coming together around, opioid crisis and what we're doing as a county, right, to position ourselves.
We did also have a one pager prepared for the commissioners for the fly-in on the stabilization expansion.
Yeah,
And so it should be in your inbox, but if it's not, I can get it to Amy.
that'd be
for
great.
you to take copies. I leave behind for the members and their staff.
Anything else? Thank you. Okay, so with that, it is then 10:26. We will adjourn for the morning and we'll see everybody back for the 2 o'clock Commissioner consent agenda. Thank you all and have a great day.